You asked for it. Now you've got it. The ultimate FIFA soundtrack has been decided with iconic artists like Muse, MGMT, Saint Motel, Blur, Billie Eilish, and more, making their return in FIFA 23's new World Cup mode. Play the World Cup now in FIFA 23 on PlayStation 5. FIFA 23, the world's game.
PlayStation.
This episode is brought to you by Bose. New Bose Quiet Comfort Earbuds 2 are next-generation earbuds uniquely tuned to you. Exclusive Bose technology adapts sound to the shape of your ears, delivering the world's best noise cancellation and powerfully immersive sound, so you can hear and feel every detail of the music you love. Bose Quiet Comfort Earbuds 2. Sound shaped to you. Visit Bose to learn more.
Welcome to Bigfoot
and the Bunny.
This is a couple's journey into the mysterious,
The unknown, and the paranormal.
I'm your host, Chris Carr.
And I'm your host, Kristen Johnson.
Together we are Bigfoot and the Bunny.
Welcome to Bigfoot and the Bunny. Happy Saturday, folks. I'm Chris Carr.
Happy Saturday. I am Kristen Johnson.
How we doing out there? How's things? How's things?
How's things?
How's things?
Got the sinus attack again, so.
Yeah, and we're a little tired because my neighbor, they bought a house. This house next to us sold recently, and I think they're flipping it, and they're working on the thing every day, every effing day at 6 a.m. And they're doing like all this cosmetic stuff. So they're outside with like concrete saws.
At like 7 a.m. till like God in the afternoon.
What did I yell this morning? I was wicked tired.
He yelled this morning, "My God, we should be getting paid for this."
That's right.
In his sleep. Okay. And I was like right up after that. And then I went, I was dying laughing after.
Oh, you're going to flip that bitch. Give me something out of it because you keep waking me up.
It was funny.
People.
Yeah.
People. You know, I think I'm about to go over there and give them the evil eye. Nice. So this afternoon, I was watching, and I'm going to throw some props here, and some of this information comes from Angela's Symposium. Is a YouTube channel by Dr. Angela Puka, and she has an episode talking about the evil eye, and you know a bit about the evil eye.
I do, but you know more now.
From talking to Kat Ironwood.
That's right.
That's right.
Kat Ironwood. I went and I looked everything up, and I researched a bunch of stuff after we saw Kat. So
yeah, and I was like telling her this stuff. She's like, yeah, I know that. We talked about it with Kat.
Yeah.
Oh.
That was like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 3 years ago.
But the evil eye in Italian is called malachio. Malachio. And this is, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with it. It's basically a curse you give somebody else through your gaze, just gazing at them. And it's usually caused through some sort of like envy or resentment. Right. So you have something that's better than somebody else's. I mean, how many times have you done this unintentionally? Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, yeah, well, I really like your car.
Oh,
glad you got that promotion.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. So, yeah, it's caused by that. And sometimes, so it's done given praise. Right. Which was I was just saying.
Yeah.
The way to prevent the evil eye, as was thought, and it certainly was thought by like older generations of Italian people, I've heard people talk about the evil eye, was to wear a small amulet of a horn. And they call this what, the cornetto?
Yes, cornetto.
Or cornicetto. And that's usually made of a fragile material like terracotta or clay. And if it breaks, that means it worked and it blocked the evil eye. And then you need to get another one. And the only way to get another one is to have someone gift one to you. So I think in the coming months, you'll probably see us gift each other some tiny little horns. And
now to that, what they mean is
the horns, right? So
that's where this came from.
You see this symbol, right? But it's not always up, right? To block the evil eye, another way you can do it is to kind of point them down, right? And according to Angela, they say Tia. And she's Italian. This doesn't have like a direct Italian translation, but she said it's similar to like to you. So you're like saying to you, and it's like you're pointing to the devil, pointing to hell.
Yeah.
Tio. I can just see some really old Italian woman doing this.
Oh, yeah.
I could just picture it. I don't know why.
Yeah.
But horns up, we know, is Dio and metal.
Mm-hmm.
Right on. Rest in peace, Ronnie James Dio.
Yes.
He is the best.
So
we were just talking about concerts with our guest tonight.
Mm-hmm.
And that reminds me of going to see Dio, several times. And I hate to say it, I'm going to date myself, but I got a Led Zeppelin shirt, so it's okay. The 1980s. And I was a huge fan. And I remember seeing him. I remember one time in this, Civic Center, Providence Civic Center then, has some other name now, of course, corporate. But being in the back, and like looking toward the stage to see Dio. And he was not a man of tall stature.
No, and I didn't know that until,
He was kind of short.
Short, yeah.
He had a big man's voice and a little man's body.
God,
Supposedly like super nice guy. Like I actually know people that knew him. And
yeah.
I've never heard anybody speak ill of Ronnie James Dio. And my God, he gave fantastic performances. But I remember going to see him, and he looked so small on the stage. And my crappy seats, nosebleed.
I was going to say, how far back were you?
I was way back. I was as far back as you could go. It was the day of, and I couldn't get good tickets or whatever. I was a kid, but yeah, it was like, well, that's little tiny Dio, a rainbow in the dark. It was awesome. He was awesome.
Yeah.
But
put up the comments, please. And Anne-Marie Young. Yes, stupid sinuses. We were talking earlier, so yeah, I gotta.
Hey, Debbie Wallace Hagan, how you doing?
Hey, Debbie.
Linda Judd, hello.
Yeah,
thank you for joining us. And Anne-Marie Young, how the hell you doing? Good to see you.
Yes.
And I knew you guys were just having a conversation.
Yes, we were
before the show, and that's really cool.
Yeah.
And thank you for joining our humble show.
Yes. Try not to do that.
But without further ado, I'm going to tell you about our guest and bring him right on. His name is Dr. Simeon Hein, and he is a former university professor in statistics and research methods. He came across the idea of remote viewing in 1996 and took it as a skeptic. The results of the training were surprisingly positive and convinced Dr. Hein that there is a large area of scientific knowledge that is being withheld from public discussion. We could not agree more with that statement, particularly with remote viewing. Subsequently, he established the nonprofit Institute for Residents and began teaching remote viewing classes in Boulder, Colorado, and continues to teach online. He also became interested in the topics of crop circles, unexplained aerial phenomena, and extraterrestrials. So let's bring him right on. Good evening. Good day.
Hey, guys. How's it going?
Welcome. Great, thank you. How about you?
Doing great, thanks.
Thank you for joining us.
Yes.
Yeah. So I was looking at your books, and you have a variety of books that are really just up our alley. I don't know how else to describe it. They are things we talk about on the show. Your newest book, is called Dark Matter Monsters, Cryptids, Ball Lightning, and Secret Life Forms.
Yes.
They're out there. Yeah.
They're out there. Admit it.
I got to know about this.
Yeah, we know. So please.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that? We'll start there, and then we'll.
Yeah. I mean, this is one of the biggest surprises of my life, is to realize that all of these stories we've heard all our lives about people encountering strange types of life forms, creatures, and so forth turns out to be real. And there's a lot of physics behind why it's real. You don't have to take my word for it. You could look at that book, Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, by, a Defense Intelligence Agency analyst, James Lukatsky, et al. And they're telling you there are other types of life forms out there. It's not that they're super common. There seem to be concentrated in certain areas, Skinwalker Ranch or Marley Woods or various places that have more of this type of activity. But I mean, people encounter these types of life just about anywhere outside and sometimes inside their homes too. And we don't talk about it. We've just treated it like this verboten topic. And I think science has really failed us here. It's because science has become so institutionalized post World War II. And there's such an emphasis on funding and promotions and tenure and so forth. That
it's curious that would be that way, right? With like having after World War II, post World War II, taking the German scientists, which a lot of people know that.
Werner von Braun, yep.
Right. Yeah. Operation Paperclip and all that.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's surprising because those scientists knew about this. They had to know about this. They had to know at least about the UFO phenomena, if not about other phenomena. The Nazis were really into occult phenomena, including channeling, and they must have encountered these beings from time to time too. But what I think it is, Chris, is that we just had such centralization of government after World War II, bureaucracy and coordination of science. Before World War II, it was lots of individual scientists. And then it became an institutional process because during World War II, you just had all these different agencies come together out of necessity to fight a war, right? And a very serious war at that. My dad is a World War II veteran. He was in D-Day. He landed on Omaha Beach. And
wow.
So this was serious and we could have lost. So we can understand that type of control from above during times of crisis, but that never went away. And what it leads to is all of these topics that I imagine our audience here is interested in, that you're interested in, you guys, myself, it doesn't get talked about. And finally, we see Congress is sort of getting fed up and they're asking for reports from the Pentagon. And if you look at this research, it's all been known about for decades, but it hasn't been shared with the public. I think that's been a big mistake, and we're playing catch up now to find out what sort of planet do we live on? Who else is around us? Where do they come? And what's the physics and science behind all this? Because it's pretty clear that the description of reality you all and I learned in school is not wrong. It's just incomplete. It's
absolutely, and that's like simple truths, like what were the dinosaurs about, and how many were there, and which ones were the actual fossils that we found, or is Pluto a planet? These kind of things that have all changed through our lifetime.
Is Pluto a planet this week, or
T-Rexes had feathers? What? History is not at all what it's been taught.
It's not fixed. Exactly right. Exactly.
Right.
Certainly, we look at areas of history about human barbarism. It's ridiculous, the things we're taught in school and what actually happened.
That's not true. We need to rewrite our
bringing out
books.
True history and what really
it's always been rewritten throughout history. A couple hundred years ago, we believed that we were the center of the universe, and it took real brave souls, Copernicus, Galileo, Giordano Bruno, who was burned at the stake partly for these ideas, to say, hey, we're just another planet amongst other planets, and we're not special. And that was like really a shock to folks. No one, and it was illegal to talk about this. That's what got Galileo in trouble.
That's right.
Preaching, believing in Copernican ideas like thought crimes. And it's only in the past like 200 years that we actually have accepted that we're just in this, not the center of everything, even in the universe. Our solar system isn't even a special solar system. And and it's ego. That's collective ego. And this is why we don't want to talk about cryptids and extraterrestrials, because it threatens our sense of being special. We might just be another type of animal who thinks that they're just like all the other animals out in the forest think they're special.
Yeah, hey, organism under the microscope, right? Looking at things under the microscope and they're moving around.
There they are.
We don't know how conscious they are.
Right.
Probably very conscious.
No, it's true, and I think that's what we're seeing right now. And so we've had at least 100 years of this type of scientific suppression. And I've looked at these topics. I'm not a physicist, I'm a sociologist, but sociologists like me, we look at why people don't want to confront reality, why they want to hold on beliefs, and whose interests are there to keep things, the same, keep it the same status quo. interest group. And so we can see why that happens. And so it seems like everything from Tesla on down has been really distorted, suppressed, really ostracized. People who talk about these phenomena can suffer stigma and ridicule. And even the UAP task force, right at the beginning, which was I really enjoyed reading this. They said the main obstacle to learning about UFOs, UAP, is sociocultural stigma. It's not lack of data.
Yeah. Interesting.
Very.
Yeah. There's plenty of data to support it, but
we know all about that government.
We don't know if we want to talk about that, or we're going to get bits and pieces.
Right, because pilots aren't going to share their information, civilian or military pilots, if they think it's going to hurt their career.
Exactly.
That's right. Just like the scientists and stuff that have that data and want to say
scientists. I mean, Edward Condon, the guy that wrote the Condon Report, was right up the street from me here in Boulder, Colorado.
Wow.
And we know that he had his security clearance taken away for his belief in quantum mechanics. Back in the 50s, quantum mechanics was associated with communism. And people that were associated with quantum mechanics could suffer career consequences. Quantum mechanics, the most
that's ridiculous,
highly tested scientific theory in history, hasn't been proved wrong yet, and yet somehow he was a pioneer in quantum tunneling, which is this amazing quantum property. Might have something to do with cryptids of solid objects moving through other solid objects.
Right.
Quantum tunneling, things going through other matter. And he was a friend of Einstein, and they took away his security clearance, which is why some of us think that's why he was ready to toe the line when the Air Force said, we want you to write a report and we want you to say UFOs don't matter so much, and whatever they are, keep moving along. It's not really of any consequence. That's the only way you could have written a report like that, given what was happening in the 60s at the NORAD missile stations and installations that were getting tampered with and taken offline, as we all know about. I don't know how you can say that had no national security implications, given that it happened over and over in different countries. I mean, that is still something we're not talking about, and that is like serious.
It's a mixed message. I think maybe part of it, maybe just a small part, is that the message isn't clear. We see things like that, and it's like saying, or something is telling us, like, don't screw with these ICBMs. Don't send these off. This is a really bad idea, guys. But at the same time, we have dropped nuclear bombs, right? And I don't know, why the mixed message? Why not some sort of prevention?
It wasn't just that, though. It was an EMP that they did with the silos. That's how the missile silos. That's how they got them offline. They hit them with an EMP.
My point is, though, that taking them offline is hugely mysterious, and I love those stories. But at the same time, other things have happened in the world that are cataclysmic in a way, right? That we've brought on ourselves. And why there seems to be a mixed message. It's almost like they don't know really what's coming, or I don't know. What is your insight on that?
Well, my feeling is that probably nuclear weapons interfere with their lives too, wherever they are, whatever parallel dimension or reality extraterrestrials are from. And it's probably that type of energetic, activity changes the structure of space-time, that they just don't want it messing with them. Like we wouldn't want, if the ants were fighting on the outside in your yard, like you see occasionally. I mean, as long as it doesn't affect you, you're probably not going to interfere too much, right?
Right.
Ant war in your yard, but let's say it affected something in your house repeatedly and became an issue, you would probably want them to stop fighting.
We would eradicate them.
Sure, termites. We're going to
right. So this is what's probably the issue. But I think, folks, we have to remember we don't have all the information about this. This hasn't been publicly discussed. We've had researchers bring forward witnesses. I interviewed one witness who worked at Minot Air Force Base in the early 70s, and he said he and his colleague in their security alert team, they monitor the missiles, they go out and check on them and make sure everything's okay. He said most of the time it'd be like a badger or a rabbit setting off the alarm, but this time they went out and there was a huge brilliant object down by the missile silo, and it took off vertically as they approached in their Jeep. And he said the jets were scrambled, and then the Air Force wanted to hypnotize him to try to get him to forget about it, told him not to talk to the media. And he told me he got the feeling this had happened before, given the response. But he's someone I just heard about him by accident because he knew a friend of mine in the Denver area, and he just mentioned seeing a UFO while working at Minot Air Force Base. But how many people are out there like him that have experienced something like this that really I think we should have a public discussion about, because who's doing this, who is tampering with the missiles or very interested in them, and what's you're asking, Chris, what's the message here? And I am hoping now that this will come out in these congressional hearings. We just don't know what those congressional hearings have been about, because for the most part, I think they've been classified. We know the pilots from the Nimitz incidents and the Roosevelt incidents on the East Coast have given testimony, as far as I know, in front of these congressional committees, but it's classified. And we've only seen a little bit. We saw a little bit on TV, 2 hours worth, I think.
And then what did they do? They went behind closed doors later. And
exactly. They asked him, and they said, "Well, I want to save that for the closed door session." Well, excuse me.
Yeah, like the
hello. What about the public?
What about us?
We can't talk about anything under the water. That's when they said we want to go to closed session. Well, if there are objects in the water, why not have a public discussion? That does not reveal any specific sensor information, sources, and methods to admit. As anyone who's talked to people who've been in the silent service, the submarine service part of the Navy, this happens occasionally. I've spoken to people who've been on subs, and they told this to me. I don't know if they should have, but they said they were down there and something was really fast, and they were called to quarters, and they didn't know what these objects were, and they were really fast underwater. Wow. And they weren't whales. So I think this is happening. I interviewed a guy, David Noble Whitecrow, on my channel. We just did our 12th interview, and he served in Operation Dominique, and he said they were 60s. They were testing atomic weapons out there for the missiles before they made the missiles, to make sure that everything worked properly. About 30 of these big tests. And he said they were told to stand on the deck of the USS Finch while a huge cigar-shaped object came over on the left side with a blue type of plasma coming out the back, 200 yards long. What is that? What is that?
You don't think it's ours? This is what we're getting. Oh, it's one of ours. We have this non-propulsion or whatever, and yeah,
that was not
to China.
Yeah, no, that was not the scuttlebutt on the ship. And he knew the officers because he was an artist and he had done all their portraits. And he said there's something in the Navy called comshaw, which is a type of trading of information. And if you do favors for people, they sort of share information. And he said the officers told him these were unexplained. This was not our stuff. And they were very curious. And no, this was definitely not ours. Not 200 yards long, cigar-shaped. He said there were lots of, they had names for these. They called them fireflies.
Foo Fighters?
Foo Fighters, yeah. The point is, people have experienced this and we haven't talked about it. And you and I can talk about them on our shows. We get them, but we haven't had an official public discussion with the government involved. Which is
when they get close, they dance, right? So that congressional hearing that we were referencing before about, behind closed doors, all the good information. Look at the data that they presented that was public. It was terrible. It was like a Mylar balloon. It was the worst, most debunkable videos they could have maybe presented before the public.
Right. I don't think we've seen the real smoking gun videos yet. The ones we've shown just don't show us exactly what they are. It could be debatable, could be,
it's always grainy,
but we're told we haven't seen what we saw were like third, fourth generation video. We didn't see the originals. I interviewed some of the guys from the Nimitz and the Princeton carrier group, and some of them, their responsibility was to take out the data bricks after the flights of these aircraft, and some of them went up to look for the Tic Tac. And one of these fellas, Patrick Hughes, said, within half an hour of him putting the bricks in the safe, which required 2 people to unlock, he's just getting ready to end the day, take a shower, chill out, and knock on the door. There's his commanding officer with 2 Air Force guys flanking him on each side saying, we want the data bricks. Never seen again. Never.
No.
It's like always, everything.
From one of those Hawkeye surveillance planes. So, yeah. So
By the way, what is the name of your show that you're referencing? Because
that's I just
you want to check it out.
What was that?
What is the name of your show that you're referencing?
Oh, it's just my YouTube channel. You can just look for Simeon Hein or Fractal Friend on YouTube. Fractal Friend. I think that's my handle on
That's a
YouTube.
good one.
They started handles recently.
Yeah, we love that.
Yes.
And I just like to interview people. I mean, I just want to get the facts. I want to find out what's going on. And there are a lot of veterans who are willing to talk as they get older, and at some risk to themselves of revealing information that I think they feel in spirit they were told not to talk about, maybe not officially, but they do because they want to get it off their chest before they pass on about what they saw. And it's because we only grow from discussion amongst each other and from shows like this, right? And from public conversation. And
Absolutely.
We have no excuse now not to do this. We have StreamYard, we have Zoom, we have lots of ways for people to get together and talk and bring the official channels in. And I think we need to do this. And there's another aspect to this. What's the effect on people's mental health to experience UFOs, ETs, or cryptids? And you and I know what happens to people who've experienced some of these cryptids. They have PTSD.
Yes, they do. And they're not allowed
this
to
is
talk about
serious.
it.
This is serious. I know people, these are friends I know who've experienced this. It took so long for them to get them to share their stories with me for Dark Matter Monsters, because they didn't want to relive the ridicule they experienced in high school after telling a friend that maybe they and their dad saw a huge hairy biped just stroll across the road over a fence without even slowing down.
It makes no sense in a world, right?
Doesn't.
It breaks your reality.
Yeah, and your brain's trying to comprehend it, what you saw, and you saw it, but your brain works differently.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
And there's a really good newer documentary called A Flash of Beauty, Bigfoot Revealed, which I recommend.
Had them on, yeah.
It's a great documentary, great bunch of folks.
Yeah, we watched it.
They were wonderful, yes.
Yeah, and they have these psychiatrists in the show at the end saying, not only do witnesses have PTSD from encountering Bigfoot, and especially dogmen, and other type, there's more. You could forget about it. In other words, just like you're saying, Kristen, your brain could delete it from your experience because it's too far. Yeah, it's too far out of the box. Your brain doesn't know what to do with this. So it's possible that we've had encounters. I don't remember ever encountering a cryptid, but any of us could have had that encounter and you don't remember it, which is why you have a little bit of missing time after being in the woods.
Right.
True.
Right. And, as children, we spent a ton of time in the woods, both of us, not together. We didn't know each other quite then.
Right.
But, it was like part of the growing up experience. And certainly we haven't seen Bigfoot crossing the road yet either.
Oh, we don't know that.
We've seen
blocked it out.
at least not consciously. But we have seen phenomena that we recall that just kind of broke our reality. And we said, well, how does that work? It doesn't make any sense.
That's where Bigfoot and the bunny came
do
from.
not apply. Whether it was a UFO or something that happened in this very room. We've seen a lot of, we're going to call it weird shit.
Yes.
That made no sense. And thank you so much for mentioning the platform. And you're so right. When we were growing up, we would have to go to the library, use the Dewey Decimal System, try to find stuff out, research history, because history does note, a lot of these sort of like cryptid and other encounters. In fact, we just watched a great movie. I'm just going to throw this out there.
We're never watching another movie again. I won't touch this.
To things, but this movie was so cool. It's called The Cursed. It's on Hulu. And it has like a lot of history in it. And it has sort of like dogmen or werewolf stuff tied in with biblical references, with brutal history toward minorities, and it was really good. And it's fiction, But in all fiction, there's always a little truth
to it.
Little truth to it. So it got our minds ticking. We want to look into some of that stuff. Yeah. But thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's we don't have a good grasp of this reality, and that's why I wanted to write Dark Matter Monsters. There is science behind orbs, ball lightning, luminous phenomena. I've seen ball lightning occasionally, and it's very interesting. One of the times I saw it in the UK, in the crop circle areas, I actually took a video of it, and I kept forgetting that I had taken the video. I didn't even bring it up in Dark Matter Monsters, and I'm just wondering, here I'm writing a book about ball lightning, and I don't even talk about this sighting, which I had someone who knew about videography stabilize it for me so that we could see the orb. And it looks like this flickering, flashing orb, right? It was hanging below a cloud for about half a minute or so. And it's just no explanation for what that is in ordinary reality. I mean, ball lightning, yes, but what is ball lightning? So when you look into what ball lightning is, it's another state of matter. It's what's called coherent matter. It's a type of macroscopic quantum matter where all the particles are at the same frequency and sort of become one big particle, one big electron. And
really?
It's all charged into one big.
Yeah, one big thing where they've sort of lost their individual identity and just become one big particle. And there's not necessarily a temperature change. It's not like it's warm. People who've been around ball lightning can report that it's cool, but it can still melt metal even though it's cool. It's a whole different state of matter. But this is something that science does understand. Science does understand quantum effects, quantum entanglement,
string theory. They do.
We know about this.
Theoretical.
It's not total mystery.
Yeah.
The observation of those electrons makes a difference too, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. So they have this sort of larger wave function, but we only see one version of it. We see only, the position or the momentum. And that led to the idea of parallel realities in the 1950s from a Princeton University graduate student named Hugh Everett III. Because of that issue, what's called the measurement problem. That's the name of it, because when you measure the quantum system, you change it. So one way to deal with that is just to say there's many versions of reality and you're only seeing a slice of it. The other versions still exist. And we have to wonder when people see different types of what we call paranormal phenomena, if it's not a type of bleed through from these other parallel realities, because these cryptids, not to mention other types of phenomena like this, can seem to teleport. They can seem to become invisible while you're looking at them. I know a couple cases of this. They can cloak. They can start looking like a tree stump or a bush or a boulder. Not completely convincing boulder or tree stump, but good enough for government work. You're probably not going to notice it if you're just walking around. It's just going to be another tree stump. So they seem to have some abilities, macroscopic quantum abilities, which really has a lot in common with orbs and ball lightning as a fifth state of matter. I'm saying fifth state of matter beyond solid, liquid, gas, plasmas, which are like neon bulbs and lightning. And aurora borealis is a type of plasma. And plasma is very common throughout the universe. It's kind of glowing matter. But
the sun.
What was that?
Isn't it through the sun, the aurora borealis? It's like from CMEs.
Yeah. From the way that the sun affects our magnetic fields and it creates this ionized gas way up there in the atmosphere, right? It's from the sun. And there's a state of matter beyond that, the plasmas, which is kind of self-organized plasma, which is what we call coherent matter. So what I'm suggesting is that there's life on Earth that learned to take advantage of the types of energy states of coherent matter. And because they do this, they seem weird to us. They just don't seem like they play by the ordinary 3D rules that we all play by, because they don't. Because once you're in the state of coherent matter, you have available to you various types of energy and transformation of materials. You've heard about Bigfoot leaving these gifts for people behind, which are sometimes exactly what they needed, or even repairing things around the yard in the strangest way, but it is repaired the next morning. They seem to have the ability to transmute matter. I mean, not to mention the fact that they seem to glide over the forest surface. And I'm not saying in every single case, but people see them gliding and sliding and incredible acceleration.
Moving in ways that we don't normally associate movement.
Right.
Right. And to me, that suggests that they're taking advantage of all of the benefits of coherent quantum matter, which is that it can transform itself very quickly. And it can sometimes resemble the Predator entity in the movie Predator. Because people have seen the shimmering saran wrap.
We saw a phenomena like this in a tree in a haunted location.
Yes.
You did.
Yes, we did. And it looked a lot like Predator, and things were dropping out of the tree, and it was really weird. And it was this sort of blurry thing up there. We took
was
pictures
jumping from tree to tree.
And it seemed to be moving from the trees. And it was like, what are you watching, Predator? It's so weird. How do we even tell people about this?
We don't.
That's what people say. How do you talk about it? Well, the way to talk about it is to look what it has in common with other things we know that are like that. And that is orbs, ball lightning, luminosities, and so forth. They jump around. They seem to transform. They change colors. They seem to be weightless, to create their own gravitational field, which is a big clue. Coherent matter creates its own gravitational frame of reference. It's not literally in the same reality that we are, because it's changed the structure of gravity and the structure of space-time. I mean, and there's all the sciences behind that. I mean, we've heard about OSAP, the OSAP program, and ATIP and all this. They knew about all of this, and they, it was a program that didn't really share a lot of its information. We just found out about it, I guess, since 2017, since the New York Times article. But people that worked in those programs have talked about this and how space-time can change structure around UFOs. So we're talking about a type of physics, you could call it advanced physics, but I mean, here's my point. This is not a total mystery. A lot of this is a mystery, but some of the physics is not. I'm going to say it's been around since Tesla, or even way before. Maybe even civilizations thousands of years ago knew about this.
That's what we agree with. It was probably before civilizations.
Yeah, we think a lot of that and ponder, because we don't know, if there are things before the cataclysmic events in the history of the Earth.
Young Dryas.
Civilizations maybe got further than we did before, the end of it. We're talking about the last 200 years or something right now. But it's such a fraction of the history of the planet, I keep changing. The moon isn't what we thought it was growing up. Now it's something else, and they're not
showing
sure.
itself.
The moon is pretty interesting.
Right. All these ideas get updated. Right. Yeah. No, it's true. And the real principle that I see behind all these phenomena, something called resonance. It's when things are in resonance, they behave differently than when they're all doing their own thing. And there's this sort of continuum of coherency, and along this line of resonance, as things become more similar, they lose some of their individuality, but they're able to pick up properties that really seem almost magical, like teleportation.
Yes.
People have seen Dogman or Bigfoot almost moving around them in like jumps, like it's here, then it's here, then it's here. I don't think they're making it up, and I don't think that's just some sort of physiological function of your brain kind of under stress, seeing things that way. I think they're literally doing something like quantum jumping. I mean, I really think it's something like that.
It could be. Part of it could be the way your brain's processing this unbelievable
Could be.
It's observation too, right?
But they're there. It's there.
Talk about colors and being able to see colors, and they know that if you grow up in a culture that has a name for a color, right?
Yeah.
You're able to differentiate it from the other shades. If you don't, it's very hard to distinguish some of those colors in different shades, which is just a weird thing because we put a name to it, it becomes familiar, and our brains are able to accept that and look at a palette of colors and say, all right, this is this, where if you don't have names for the different shades, and I know this seems outside, but your brain, it takes longer to differentiate what's really happening and what you're looking at, the two colors might be close, but if your culture has names for those particular shades, you're going to pick it up right away. It's almost like training,
It's a good point.
Yeah.
Our sense of reality is partly from our education, social consensus, language. That's part of it, Chris. But the other part of it is that there are phenomena out there that are taking advantage of these principles, I would say, of nature, where, like, you're talking about this sort of predator-like figure that looks like saran wrap or something, it's just shimmering. People have seen this. And to me, that suggests just, again, it goes beyond our language. So it's hard to talk about. But it doesn't mean it's not real. It just means it's a challenge for us to accept. Look, we know there are animals out there, animals like octopus and cuttlefish, that can instantly change their color to blend in with the background, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
This would be something like that, but in more mammalian type life forms. And I'm not saying they're animals. These are something that are evolved like us. They're beings like us because they seem to be able to communicate with us. Sometimes they mimic people's speech, or they're very good at a type of ventriloquism and sort of a mimicry. They can sound like you out in the forest. They can sound like you calling for your dog. It's confused people. They think they hear themselves. What's that?
Sounds like haunted phenomena. Hearing the voice of
but
somebody deceased or something in the next room.
Yeah.
It's certainly creepy. And I think it's creepy, guys, because we think we're the top of the food chain. I think every species wants to believe it's the top of the food chain until it realizes there's another life form that might be even higher up on the food chain. We've assumed we're the top of the food chain. But if there were other predators out there, they might not make their presence known because that's what predators do. They conceal themselves. Those fish that have that little tongue that looks like a worm.
Yeah, right.
And to the little fish, it looks like a worm until it's. So these are just possibilities, but I think the main point here is there's some commonalities here with science that we know and accept. Yes, some of it is part of classified black budget programs, but that doesn't mean we can't talk about the science behind it. Let me just point out something really important. In Dark Matter Monsters, I talk about this Lockheed Martin patent where they're talking about creating coherent matter wave beams and from quantum principles, just saying that you don't need cold temperatures for things to become coherent. You could do it at room temperature with resonance. That's exactly what they say in their patent, which took the patent office, by the way, about 10 years to approve it. But if these defense contractors are patenting these ideas, I think it shows us it's got a pretty solid basis in science, right? Even if you and I it's new for us to talk about this idea of resonance and quantum mechanics. And there are these spooky quantum effects like the Aharonov-Bohm effect, where you can affect something at a distance without directly influencing it, indirectly through resonance and frequency. Mm-hmm. It's not all that surprising, is it? I mean, it sounds reasonable. You're wearing a Led Zeppelin t-shirt. You know what it's like to be at a concert. You were talking about Dio. We've all been to a concert, right? We know what the feeling of resonance is. When the music becomes coherent enough, it physically affects matter beyond the way you felt that those.
There's a great energy in a room.
It's awesome. Yeah, the energy itself. Yes,
it's kind of like that ball lightning, right? Frequency. It's now being observed, and we're all in sync with each other and going, "Yeah, Dio."
Yeah. That's what ball lightning is they're all going Dio, Dio, Dio all at the same time, and they cohere. And that's what happens in a concert, which is why it's so much fun to be there. I think it's really similar to this. I mean, we're having fun with this, but that's really the physics behind it. There's a concept in physics called cymatics. I'm sure you've heard of it, that you put sound into a metal plate and it becomes a coherent structure on the metal plate as you change the
geometric structure
shapes, like crop circles. It has that sort of appearance. That's same thing, coherency, resonance. If you can find a way to modulate that and tune it, it just gives you many more possibilities to interact with material reality, including, again, invisibility, cloaking, teleportation. But by the way, these are all mentioned in the Lockheed Martin patent, so it's no surprise that people see this around Bigfoot and other cryptids. It just seems like maybe we're not the first ones to invent these ideas. You know, if we're getting around to it, guys, nature probably developed this millions of years ago. The fact that we're discovering it now doesn't mean it's new. It just means you and I and our cohorts are discovering it. We assume, oh, no one's ever known about this before. They have, and other creatures probably figured out, evolved around these principles.
Sure.
Adaptation.
And it's what we do. You use it in a way that helps your particular life and that of your group.
It may be in some way we're more hidden from them than we know as well.
Everybody uses, not everybody, but a lot of people use the ant metaphor. Analogy, thank you. One or the other. And we agree with that. It's like ants. You step on the pile, ants go crazy, you know? But they don't know we're there, I don't think, and we don't know.
You can coexist for God knows how long and never encounter the anthill, and the ants just go about their business and all is well. But once there's an interaction, you know, like we're just noticed, and then, you know, now we're more like the antelope and the lion, right?
Oh, you
like,
go back to that again.
Right, I like that. Analogy / metaphor as well, because I think, you know, it's like like you said, it's our human nature to feel like we're top of the food chain, like we're always in control, but we're in control until we're not. And then when you're not, oh shit, you know, anything can happen.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And you're all familiar with the saying, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, this is sort of modern people. You know, we like to focus in on, just what Anita's saying.
Yes.
This is what Tesla understood. And this is such a threat to the establishment at the time to have free electricity, energy that was too cheap to meter. That was Tesla's dream, based on resonance, universal resonance.
Don't even get us started on the government. Yes.
Right.
Or corporate. Yes.
Yeah.
But, you know, we can change it. It can change. We were having this discussion now. We're not afraid, like Copernicus or Galileo, of being put under house arrest, or not talking, you know, publishing this because we're afraid you could, you know, I don't think we have that fear anymore. So we can see some progress here. But it really, again, comes down to the idea there's always this assumption that we're the most evolved things around. But how would we really know? And there's this wonderful idea in mathematics called the incompleteness theorem from Alan Turing and Kurt Gödel, two mathematicians that worked on a similar idea that any idea of reality is always incomplete. They proved this mathematically using set theory, that there's always going to be things that are true that you cannot talk about or even prove from your existing frame of reference. So we know that there's going to be a vast amount of reality that cannot be defined by our ideas, our culture, our logic. And it could well be that what we call paranormal phenomena are exactly these phenomena that would be, you know, the incompleteness theorem predicts. And you don't have to run away from it. Again, you always start with the commonalities. And I think if we tie in the loose ends here, we'll see that space-time is more malleable than we've been taught. It's more flexible. You've heard about the Mandela effect.
Sure.
Right?
Yes.
We'll have multiple memories, different memories of the past, conflicting memories.
Yes.
And how do we know that they're not both true? Just from different from different reality paths. There are different versions of the same events. So instead of denying
this,
yes,
we could get really heady on this. So we're only, you know, we only know what's happening right now. Everything else is a memory, and I'll put that in quotes. All of that,
right? Yeah, it's true.
We don't possibly know, right?
Yeah. So the thing is, instead of denying all that this is all real and just throwing cold water on these topics, we should be investigating them, looking into them. And it's going to take, I think, a bit of fortitude to have the guts to look into these topics, right? Instead of, I mean, seriously, you've all listened to witnesses who've encountered these cryptids in their neighborhoods, right? Just beyond the edge.
Yes.
It's the biggest shock of their life to think that you're in this nice suburban neighborhood or wherever you live, and you had this sort of illusion that it was just humans there, and maybe the occasional deer or rabbits or chipmunks, squirrels, but that was, you're it. And then all of a sudden you find out there's other intelligent two-legged life around that. Maybe it's friendly, maybe it's not. You don't really know. It could bang on your house at night, throw rocks, has glowing eyes. And this is real. And it's very hard to admit that. Collectively, it's hard for us to admit that this is true. But this is where we have to go. I think if we're going to make progress, we have to have this discussion. We have to have this adult discussion, guys. Or we're not
Pull my finger. We really do. It needs to be out more. Like you said, government needs to do something. And of course, they're not gonna, like we were talking about earlier, behind closed doors. Yay.
It's got to start from the people. People have to bring it to the government. So it just becomes such an outrage that people do discuss it. And then we get an official, quote unquote, tally on what might be happening or what the phenomena is that people are experiencing. We find that, like most people on our show that have had some sort of experience or experiencer in some way, whether it's hauntology, ufology, phenomenology, whatever you want to call it, cryptozoology, which I have had some sort of experience in their childhood. And that goes back to what you mentioned about a memory, right? So they have some memory from their childhood of something peculiar happening, something they can't quite explain. And then they're involved in it as adults.
I have one of those memories.
As do we.
I have a memory. My mom was a bird watcher. We went down to the Everglades, just me and her, to look for birds. We both had binoculars, and I see something overhead that looks like a full moon. And as an 11-year-old, I just thought, oh, that's the moon. So I said, Mom, look at the strange moon, because it was green and glowing. And she said, no, the moon's over there on the horizon. So then we looked up at it with binoculars, and she said, wow, Sim, what is that? We looked up, and it was had structure within the cloud-like shape that it was, round shape. It had dots that looked like a Z or something like this for Zeta. I don't know what dots. Some structure, like technology within an amorphous-looking object, and then it just starts moving. Totally still. All of a sudden, it's moving, goes into a cloud. We go to the ranger talk that night to the amphitheater, as they have at national parks. And the ranger says, did anybody see anything interesting today? By the way, the lights have blacked out, so we can't look at the slides because there's a blackout now. And people next to us had seen this object too. So the ranger says, anyone see anything interesting today? She's a flashlight because the lights aren't working. And it's blackout. And my mom says, we just saw a UFO. And she said, that's interesting. Did anyone else see anything today they want to talk about?
Immediately or only perceived by you.
And
she didn't want to talk about it, which is the government byline. Just say it was a weather balloon, it was ice crystals, it was flocks of geese or
swamp gas.
Swamp gas. Oh yes, let us not forget swamp gas.
Yeah.
And something like our parents, our grandparents would always say was like, we don't talk about that. That sort of phrase, I think, got passed around for all kinds of phenomena.
We don't talk about that.
We don't talk about that.
I can just hear Stanton Friedman. We don't talk about that around here. If you know what's good for you, you won't talk about that. Yeah. So this is what happens when you don't talk about it. You don't make any progress as a society scientifically, and you end up in the situation where we are in now, where the electrical grid is really weak and things seem a lot more brittle than you would have thought they were in 2022. 30 or 40 years ago when we were reading Omni magazine, and it looked like we were all going to have flying cars and houses that cleaned themselves.
Yeah.
And we were, you said the Jetsons, you were going to, we thought we were going to be living in the future by now. And here we are
in
with
the future.
Our clunkety cars, paying huge amounts for gas, with an electrical grid that we told could go down at any time because no one's invested in it in 100 years. Some of the parts are 100 years old. This is the price that we're paying for not, engaging in the conversation. Engaging in the conversation gets us all thinking, using our imagination, and it inspires kids to become scientists and engineers, just like Star Trek did. And so we've sort of artificially held our own progress back as a society, in my view, in the United States, by not engaging in these conversations, and for very unfairly, in my view, calling them junk science, pathological science.
Oh, I hate it.
What? Pseudo. Oh, yes. Pseudoscience. That's what Lockheed Martin does. They do pseudoscience. I forget. That's why it's in their Northrop Grumman talking about shadow life on Earth.
Why they get so much money?
Yeah.
They get all this money for pseudoscience.
Sure.
Yeah.
Don't
this is why the Department of Energy buys up some of these companies and you never hear about them again, because you see, we've done this to ourselves from too much compartmentalization, too much stovepiping. Even Hal Puthoff told us this from the SR. He told us this in 2018 at the SSE IRVA meeting in Las Vegas, Society for Scientific Exploration and International Remote Viewing Association joint meeting. He said, we're overly stovepiped, and this classification is leading to a lack of progress. And he said right there on stage, we're going to have a Sputnik moment. And the Sputnik moment is when the satellite's going overhead and you realize they have them and you don't. They've taken a leap. And this is what we've done to ourselves with this excessive secrecy. Even the Clintons, you remember they had some initiative to declassify. Various presidents have attempted to do this. And you hear this, you hear this coming from Congress right now, is why is all this UFO information so classified? We've had at least 70 years of incidents and crashes and data. I'm not hearing any of it. And I speak to these witnesses, and I've spoken to people that know of these crash retrievals. And it hasn't made its way into the public discussion yet, what these materials are made of. That we're told from people that have seen these UFO materials, it's technology that's about 1,000 years ahead of our technology. It's literally quantum technology. Just like we were talking about earlier, it modifies space-time. That's the propulsion. You just change the structure of space-time a little bit and thin out the quantum vacuum field ahead of the craft. I mean, scientists I've talked to who've handled this secretly. I mean, they didn't go on the news the next day and said, "Yay, some agency came to me and wanted to know how this super thin material from a UFO works." But they looked at it under electron microscope, and they told me it's not made of isotopes.
Okay.
Chemical elements with slightly different modifications of electrons or neutrons than we normally see. It's not made of isotopes you find on Earth. It's from another part of the galaxy. It's made in zero G. And it's the nanotechnology in it is generations beyond what we have. The smallest we can make chips now, I think, is 5 nanometers. Spacing close together. And then you can pack more and more circuits in. But they said this is
really small.
Yes. Yeah, this is generations past that. And they said they worked on the best stuff. This is beyond us. So they told me they were 100% certain, 100% that this was extraterrestrial. They had no doubt this is not from here. And this is why someone came to them and said, "Hey, can you figure out for us how this works?" We'd like to know.
So I real quick here, I just wanted to ask you about that. Yeah. The person that you interviewed, they worked on a craft, correct?
They were given a piece of a craft 3 to 4 feet long with a curvature in it that to them suggested the entire craft was probably about 80 feet wide diameter.
Wow.
It was curved.
Metal, like an alloy?
Yeah, it was made of alloys, but the materials, they were made of isotopes of chemical elements that are not found on Earth. They're found in
alloys are put together in a way that we don't even have the tech really to put together, right?
Right.
I think that's part of it.
We don't even have whatever it is, the concept to even we do, but
not found
figure it out. But
nature,
it's not from here.
Right. The isotopic ratios, specifically were not the ratios found in Earth. Now, you could make them with bombarding materials with particles. It'd be very expensive, very time.
Nobody would do that. And to create a piece of metal, right?
Yeah,
no one would do that just to create a metal. No.
CERN with the 7 CERNs we have, but yeah.
Right. They thought this was really a type of technology that interacted directly with the quantum vacuum field.
Jeez.
Changes the constants that we're used to that determine the speed of light. And then that craft is operating in a different frame of reference with its own speed of light. And to them, we seem slowed down, which we seem like the dumb bunnies. We're slowed down compared to theirs.
You use bunny as a term. Come on.
I'm kidding you. I'm kidding you a little bit. But
I know you. I'm only goofing with you.
Now, we haven't talked about this yet. I don't see how it's a threat to national security to have a general discussion about this. There must be other scientists besides this person I just happened to meet at a science conference who've been asked to handle these, crash retrieval materials, however they got the materials, who probably came to the same conclusion. It was made in zero-G environment. It's not from here. Now, to me, this is fascinating. I think this could occupy the news cycle 24/7. Think of all the fascinating discussions we're going to have, folks. Who made this technology? Where are they? What's their relationship to us? Basically, the whole structure we have as we know it comes crumbling down. I'm talking mentally in terms of our basic ideas that inform religion and our culture, and that's going to change. But it changed again when Galileo and Copernicus were around and said, we're not the center of the universe. That was a big crux of the whole paradigm back then. We were the center of the universe. We were the height of God's creation, and humans were created in his image, right? And that we're it. We're like, God's children, and this is it. There's nothing better than us.
We're on a road to like another turning point, just like Galileo, where
we are.
This is change the way they think about reality.
This is why it seems so slow, Chris. I got involved in this area of research. I just found out I've been teaching RV for 25 years now. And by the way, people are welcome to take classes with me. I still teach them online. You put my link there, Mount Baldy. If you just click on resident viewing, you'll see there's self-paced courses. People can engage in this on their own or with me in classes. But I've been doing this for 25 years. And it has seemed kind of glacially slow, the progress we've made since I started going to UFO conferences and talking to people like Dr. Roger Lear, Varginha Incident. Wow. Yeah. I've heard him lecture about that 4 or 5 times. I talked to him about it. Stanton Friedman and all the other greats of ufology who got my curiosity going in this very, credible people. But it seemed after 25 years, we would have made a little more progress. But I do have hope. It's sort of like a rubber band. If you keep pulling back, when you finally release the rubber band, it's going to really snap forward. I think that's where we are. So I think, Chris, that's true. I think we're at the edge of a vast, which is why I think there's concern that it could go out of control. But hey, where chips are going to fall where they may, just like it did in Galileo's time. And that still took a long time for people to accept this, even after Galileo and Copernicus had said what they said and, published their books. It still took about 100 years for people to say that could be true, that we're not the center of the universe.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Every day we find our telescopes out there. Now there's the James Webb telescope. Every day, they're finding new exoplanets. How many exoplanets have they found out there now? New galaxies.
Kepler. Same thing with the Kepler. Yes.
Kepler telescope. It's vast out there. It's vast. And it doesn't, we're fine. Aren't we fine? So we're finding new exoplanets. It's not the end of life every day, the end of the world that we're finding new exoplanets. And who knows what they'll find with the James Webb telescope. So I think, this is the direction it's going in. Let's bring it on. Let's have this party. Let's get the party going.
Let's get the party started.
It's going to be fun. And we're going to learn about who we are. Maybe the older establishment feels threatened by this. Well, that's reality. Okay. Sorry.
I got a couple of things I wanted to touch on before we're done. One, I think, was EMF. I think I read that in your bio about electromagnetic frequency. Yeah. And that's something we talk about, and it comes up in the paranormal. We tend to be more in the paranormal realm.
Which is all under the umbrella.
It's all under the umbrella. I mean, we've done experiments with magnets that throw off EMF on their own and that sort of thing to see if there's any phenomena around them and the haunted location. And find that there is some sort of effect. Bad wiring can have an effect, right? But Kristen's house, very strange things have happened, and I think it is related to the wiring. We do. Things powering themselves on without being plugged in, that sort of thing. Really weird stuff.
Yeah, we were just talking about this last night. I'm like, oh yeah.
Isn't there also a connection to cryptids with that?
Definitely. What we've learned from the study of cryptids, coherent matter, orbs, ball lightning is there is an alternative arrangement of electromagnetism based on fractal geometry. These are regularly shaped objects, the Mandelbrot set. This is what I studied in graduate school was fractal geometry and how it's used to, measure information, compress information, JPEGs. We're all familiar with JPEG pictures now, but back then, when I was doing my dissertation in the early 90s, that was like a big deal, JPEG. But that's fractal compression. So when you have fractally shaped electromagnetic fields, this is the big thing. They don't radiate outward. They radiate inward and go all the way down to the quantum field and tap into their own energy source. They're what's called closed pointing vectors. Normally in electromagnetism, you have these open pointing vectors of electricity and magnetism at right angles. And a number of researchers from Stanford and other places, Japan and Russia, found over the years that if you create this donut-like shape, think of it as a focused donut, a toroidal shape of magnetism.
Toroidal, yeah.
You can get fractal toroids. And I have a picture of this that I had my artist draw in Dark Matter Monsters about what a fractal toroid. It just loops within loops within loops. If you had it as a coil, it would look like a kind of coiled donut with different braids and loops all kind of looping within each other. Mm-hmm. When you get these fractally related electromagnetic loops, it creates this type of coherent matter. It creates a whole nother state of matter. And I think, Chris, that's what we saw in the crop circles. That's why crop circles create ball lightning and affect our cameras and batteries and equipment, because I've seen this so many times. And way before I knew anything about the topic of cryptids or even UFOs, I was seeing our cameras and batteries fail in crop circles. And this is what people experience around haunted sites. Maybe you guys have experienced it yourselves. And I was really surprised to learn that people experience this around Bigfoot and other types of cryptids. So what, to me, again, it suggests that we're dealing with this same sort of alternative electromagnetic structure, which is fractally based, right? Mm-hmm. And and this is not, I'm not putting this in as some sort of metaphysics. This is what the previously classified Soviet science says. Fractal toroidal structures, specifically based on the Koch snowflake fractal, just more and more detail the closer you go down. If you create electromagnetic structures like that, they're different than the ones we're used to. They radiate inward, and to us, they seem really strange, create strange effects in electronics, batteries, and they can create these persistently glowing luminosities. The Soviets found they could create them for 2 days after turning off the power.
Wow.
And completely removing the equipment from a table, you would get what they called electromagnetic phantoms. Oh. Glowing objects with no equipment there. Just it's like the shadow, the phantom of the equipment that was there.
Wow.
And they knew how to reproduce this, and they called it the fractal donut or an electromagnetic phantom. They said that glow could last for 2 days, and some Soviet scientists got it lasting for months. So you can understand why our intelligence agency said, well, for even beyond the RV program, the psych, like, how are they doing this? They probably started studying at the same time, too, in the 70s, 80s.
Sure.
It's another type of technology. To me, and again, I could be wrong, but to me, the fact that you see this type of persistent glow around UFOs, around cryptids, crop circles, I've seen it myself. And even RV sessions generate these weird phenomena. When Hal Potoff and Russell Targ were testing Uri Geller at SRI,
yes,
they found they were experiencing cryptids sometimes in their bedrooms when Uri Geller was around, and small UFOs flying around the lab.
Mm-hmm. Wow. That's good. I didn't know that story.
Yeah, we didn't know that. Wow.
You can watch
bending spoons.
Yeah, right. We know him for bending spoons, and he was also a great remote viewer. And you can see this. Don't take my word for it. You can see this in the documentary Third Eye Spies by Lance Mungia.
Yes.
Yeah, great documentary.
Michelle Fried's in it. We love her. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We like
So,
that. Sorry.
yep. So a lot of people we know are in it, but they document Uri Geller's amazing abilities to do RV, to bend things, psychokinesis. And if you read about what they experienced around that, they had even aports, objects showing up out of nowhere.
You call it aports. We were doing this the other day on Gail Heison's show. She had interviewed us. We didn't know what to call it, aports or apports.
Right. We get lost in that. We were talking about Stanley Krippner's collection of apports.
Yeah.
But again,
on our apports too.
It's so strange. You could say, what is this? But how does Russell Targ find his lapel pin that's been missing for 6 months? And then Uri goes up and it's in the ice cream cone. It's in the ice cream they buy on the beach from an ice cream vendor. And then the other lapel pin falls from the sky at their feet while they're walking on the beach. There isn't any way for Uri to hoax that. Okay. This is
how is that possible?
A different composition than the originally was too, right? So that's been shown in these apports or aports. We don't know how to say it either.
Yeah, aports.
And then you get aports around Bigfoot. You get aports around Bigfoot too. People having objects show up. People have reported their cars being fixed overnight in the strangest way. But there it was. It was reasonably well fixed the next morning, and they found a little stack of rocks, the calling card.
Yeah, it's weird. It's nice, but it's weird.
Stone pyramid structure that flex to the car. I mean, you could say, hey, it's too much. It's past my boggle point. Or you could say, just accept it that this is another state of matter and it defies the 3D world that we all grew up with and we thought this was all it was, and it isn't.
Right. Anita says, dude, I get them in my bed, LOL. And then she says, I learned it as
a port.
There's an X-ray in that one.
Port. Yeah, I don't know.
Appleport.
Did I say it incorrectly?
I don't know.
I don't know.
We say apport.
We say apport.
I think it comes from a French word, and it really kind of depends on your dialect as to how to pronounce it properly.
New Englanders, so.
And we live in New England, and our language is totally upside down. Anyway, but there was a couple good questions out here. I'd like to toss at you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Mentioning the crop circles, and I know you've been to the UK many times to be there in person with the crop circles. You told us prior to the show. Is there a way? There are different feelings. I think she's asking. Are there different feelings in the different areas of the crop circle?
That's a good question.
Do you get a sensation, an emotional connection, or anything like that?
Do you feel static in one part? It's a good question.
Yeah, no. Some of them, it's a good question because some of them make you feel ecstatic and really great. Like it's another type of energy field. I'm not kidding. It's just really exhilarating to be in some of them. Others just feel like, like a downer, like Debbie Downer. They just don't feel great to be in. There's the pumper uppers and the drainer downers.
Oh, I love that.
Interesting.
And
so you do feel an emotional difference.
Yeah, it's a different frequency, and some of them are not right for you, and some of them just you don't even want to go in them. Okay.
I
don't. Some of them feel amazing, and some don't, and they have a frequency to them. They have a resonance, and I don't just think it's the fact that some of them have pesticides on them, and some don't, because we all went pretty late in the season, and those would have sort of dissipated by the time we got into those fields. I really do. I always wondered about that. Why some of them you'd go in and not want to leave, and people would come in and it was like a party or something, right? Because it was just like, and some of them just felt like blah. It just felt like I just don't like being here. I want to go back to the car.
No, that it's such a real thing, and people experience this outside of crop circles. Going into a room that say everybody has an emotional energy that's up. You walk into a party, everybody feels good. You might feel a little good. You feel something without even talking to anybody yet, or you walk into a funeral procession or something like that, and everybody's got this kind of glum without even observing them. You'll feel something.
The energy.
So that's so interesting. That's a great.
No, and we have a name for that in RV.
Together.
We have a name in that for RV. We call it ambience, and it's one of the qualities you look for when you're doing your RV session in phase 2, specifically. But they have a different ambience, and that has to do with resonance and the shape, and the so forth. And the ones that we saw that were most electronically active, based on my experience, were the ones that were toroidal shaped spirals.
Wow.
Very precisely done, had a vortex type pattern to them. And all of this research showed that vortex like patterns create their own fields just like electromagnetic fields. And many of these circles are built around a vortex pattern, vortices. So I think that has to do with it.
Now, when you say that vortex patterns, do you think of ley lines?
Yeah, because in England, where I saw most of these, the people would talk about these ley lines. We would go out with dowsing rods and sort of see how the stone circles were aligned on the landscape. I'm familiar with this idea from the Chinese concept of feng shui.
Oh, okay.
Which is that the arrangement of things and objects affects the flow of qi energy. So that's the way I look at it. I'm not an expert in ley lines. I've heard people lecture about it. But it did seem that those stone circles were placed in the landscape in a certain way and, would create their own resonance too.
A certain vibration. Going back to the EMF, just to circle back to it and the vortexes, does the EMF, do you think, or have any evidence that it can increase these vortexes, these toroidal shapes or what have you, this other matter?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Can it be like an ingredient, like, or if you have a lot of EMF around for whatever reason, this electromagnetic frequency that we measure, I know it's a small scale, light is EMF, but the kind of stuff we might pick up on an EMF detector, can it lend itself to being turned into something else, like a fuel?
There is a relationship between EMF and these fractal toroidal fields, and we would attempt to measure it with a static meter. We would have a static meter. We found that some of these formations were very active in terms of their electrostatic charge, and they would make the meter go off the charts. You'd walk into them.
Like a REM pod, kind of what's in our world, right? REM pods are these little devices that paranormal investigators use that basically are triggered by static electricity.
Right. They're triggered by static electricity, and we would find that the ones that seemed statically active would affect our cameras and batteries the most.
Yes.
But here's where we went wrong initially. You have one there? EMF meter?
That's the REM pod there.
The REM. Okay.
It's a millimeter with a REM addition to it.
We have an EMF reader as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And some of them.
Electricity.
But here's the thing, even the ones that we made as experimental subjects, test subject crop circles, would be create a lot of static charge. So it wasn't a function of necessarily UFO having been there like a lot of people believed at the time. It had to do with the shape. And now let me show you one that had a really interesting effect that I included in Dark Matter Monsters. This is from Avebury Truslow in the early 90s. A colleague of mine, Ron Russell, left this formation. He was there with a group to go get batteries for his camera.
Yes.
He encountered people that he said were speaking another ancient type of English, maybe 500 years old, that he couldn't understand. They were dressed they were shorter and dressed in a different type of garb. And he felt a strange type of time distortion, like a space-time slip. You've heard of these that people experience.
Yes, time lapse.
A whole other subject related to this.
Yes.
This is what people experience around these phenomena. When Ron got back to the group, he felt like he had been gone for half an hour to an hour. But the people in the group said he had only been gone for 5 minutes.
Eesh, wow.
And this is what we're talking about, is changing the structure of space-time. What technically is called in physics permittivity, which is the electrical conductance of space. Normally it's fixed, and even the speed of light is based on permittivity and the magnetic equivalent permeability. There's a formula for determining the speed of light. The speed of light is the way it is because of permeability and permittivity. If you change permittivity, and again, this is what Hal Puthoff told us in his lecture in 2018, if you have objects that change the permittivity of an area, like fractal toroids will do, you've changed the structure of space-time, you've changed the speed of light, and things are going to seem like in a different frame of reference, which these coherent matter objects often seem to be in a different frame of reference. And how often have you and I talked to people and said something like that they can't account for an hour of time, something that should have taken 5 minutes. I know people like this. They go for a walk. They're missing some time. What is it that is doing that? Because it's a commonality to haunted sites, to crop circles, to cryptid encounters. How many UFO encounters where people have written entire books about this missing time phenomena. I'm just suggesting here something to do with this idea of permittivity, which is at the core of the science of coherent matter, orbs, charge clusters, and so forth. A great scientist named Ken Shoulders, who invented a lot of the microelectronics that we have nowadays. He did this at SRI with classified projects in the 60s and 70s.
Mm-hmm.
But he
Stanford
wrote
Research Institute.
Yes.
Yeah. He wrote about these charge clusters creating their own dark matter reality, quite literally. And he speculated that this could be what we call dark matter that's out in the cosmos that holds things together, has gravitational effects. So I think we can see there's some threads connecting these phenomena that can help us make sense of it a bit, perhaps even more than that. So it's just fascinating that there's connections, and we all know people who've had these time slip experiences. I'm sure you know people, you might have had it, people who've experienced this, even people that have gone into restaurants or bars that did not exist. They went back the next day with their friends. It was closed. People said, no, it's been locked up for 20 years. I know friends who've experienced this. They can tell me what it was like to be in that bar. Things seemed a little weird at the time, but they didn't think too much of it. And the next morning they go back and it's closed. It's been closed for decades. Or people that go to hotels that don't exist. You've heard people talk about this. Tourists going up to mountains, taking the tramway up, and they see hotels. And then people said, no, that burned down 50 years ago. They go back and it's gone. This is what we're talking about, is fundamental shifts in the structure of space-time that lead us to experience these anomalies. I mean, I think if we can talk about it like this, instead of it being some sort of just metaphysical, philosophical discussion, realize it's grounded in physics, we can realize we've all been having really weird experiences the whole time, and we've been sort of trained to make it seem normal, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And that is the beauty of it, really, is we don't have to get too much into the physics without having the experience, right? So you can have the experience and not understand that.
Right.
With the vortex or a toroidal donut, if you will, right? Mm-hmm. You can have that experience. Went to the top of the mountain. There was a hotel that burned down 50 years ago, that sort of thing.
Yeah, people
have strange dreams. They have occurrences that are vivid, and there's this whole side of
precognitive dreams.
Yeah, sure. Maybe the
Definitely.
precognitive. I think everybody kind of experiences that. Yes. You experience it with your phone. You might have an idea. Your phone buzzes, and you go, "Oh, I know what it is." Before you look, right?
It's mom.
Not because you text it 19 times a day, but just because you just know. And sometimes you do just know, right? It's a real experience. I think a lot of people have.
Yeah, no, and people who take remote viewing know about this. This seems to have when you and this is what got to me about this is when I started studying RV and really seeing, wow, there's some real results here. I noticed other changes in my life that I wouldn't have expected. Those types of synchronicities. People report knowing who's on the phone before they pick it up, and even stranger still, getting calls from people that have passed on, who died the previous day, but they hadn't heard about, and they get a call from them. And what does the call usually say? Oh, just want to know, I'm okay. Just checking in. A very short call. Yeah. My dad even had a dream like this about a friend of my mom's. I learned this recently, and he had a dream while napped. A woman called, her name is Lo, said, just tell Jane I'm fine. There was a letter downstairs on the table. My dad did not know anyone named Lo. It was a friend of my mom's, and she had just passed on, and the letter was on the table on the dining room that she had passed on, and my mom didn't even know it. Oh. And my father comes down and says, I just had this weird dream. Someone said, Lo said to tell you that she's fine, and there's the letter on the table, just came in the mail that she had passed on from her.
Wow.
So we've all had this, but we discount it. We forget about it. It doesn't fit in the normal idea of reality, quote unquote. But this is the new normal, because this is really how it works This is how it really works, folks. This is how I think it really works. It's much stranger than we thought, but it's not completely. We're not departing science. We're not, ditching science completely. It's just another type of science that I think Tesla knew about and others like him, but we just haven't really talked about very much in our particular society.
Absolutely. I love Tesla.
I love that you draw connections to dark matter itself, because it's something like Neil deGrasse Tyson will tell you.
He calls it Steve.
We don't know what it is. We just measure it. We have nothing about it. No idea.
We know a little bit about it. No, that's I disagree with Neil deGrasse Tyson about this completely. We know that about, and even people like Ethan Siegel, who writes in Forbes magazine, writes a section on cosmology, astrophysics. He's no friend of these topics. Okay, he's a deep critic of cold fusion, all this stuff. But he even had an article a couple of years ago said we now know that 1% of dark matter, a little bit, which is a lot, by the way, since dark matter so much, it's these relic neutrinos from the cosmic Big Bang. And those have been measured. They don't interact with us electromagnetically, but they can act as a catalyst for biological and chemical reactions on Earth, because their wavelength is about the same wavelength as a molecule or a cell, even as big as a cell. It has a variable range, but relic neutrinos have a quantum wavelength that interacts with biology. And they're streaming down on us all the time. From what I read, there's about 10 million relic neutrinos a second.
Nobody feels it. They have no idea it's happening.
It's coming through. We had a dark matter hurricane or something like that coming through a year ago, 2 years ago.
It changes. That's the interesting thing, Kristen. Exactly. It's not constant. There is something coming from space that's variable, relic neutrinos, a type of dark matter. We're not saying we understand all of it, but we know that a part of this dark matter is these relic neutrinos. I think NASA's talked about it, CERN, and various Russian scientists have created equipment to measure it. What they found is that it's affected by 3 body systems: Earth, Moon, Sun. Mm-hmm. It affects the flux of these neutrinos as they come from way out in the cosmos to our galaxy, to our Earth. And it affects plant growth, radioactive beta decay, which should be totally constant. They found it varies by time of year. It's not affected by day and night, which means it's not coming from the sun. It's some galactic type extragalactic flow that's affected by the alignment of galaxies and planets. Really fascinating. Absolutely. And this dark matter is more, Siegel says this dark matter is more, this type of dark matter, just this one type, 1%, 0.5%. It's more than all the known matter in the universe, even that one type of dark matter. And we're interacting with it all the time. It catalyzes electrochemical reactions. And in dark matter monsters, I argue that it could be a type of energy source that's utilized by some type of life, since it catalyzes reactions. It's known as something that's bosonic. Bosons meaning particles that like to pair up together versus electrons that usually repel. It encourages bosonic pair-like reactions. And that is a fundamental aspect of what makes our reality work, the structure of matter, and even things like superconductivity. You've heard of things like Cooper pairs and so forth. This type of dark matter could increase superconductivity. And I have to tell you, I'm not trying to toot my horn here, but even a number of years ago, I wrote a little abstract saying, are crop circles acting like a vortex for dark energy or dark matter? Dark energy is something slightly different, but at the time, that's what I thought it could be. In other words, what are the crop circles lensing? And I suggested in this abstract that it's lensing something that's sort of extraplanetary dark energy or dark matter. And now that I'm reading this, I'm seeing that's actually what a lot of these top-level physicists are thinking, is that we're interacting with some types of dark matter. It is still a big mystery, and there's a lot of questions about it. Mm-hmm. But who would have thought that some sort of cosmological flow coming from way out there in the depths of the universe actually interacts with life on Earth? It seems that it does.
Where is there the intelligence behind it, right? So you're talking about it being these kind of almost not random, but fractal type things interacting with dark matter, putting this sort of imprint down. But then we have some that have clearly an intelligence behind them besides being a cool design or being nice artistically, as we would put it. There'll be some sort of IQ behind it. All right, this is really a reflection of something that happened, and there was a thought and intent behind that is not, just a fractal. Where does that come from? What do we think?
Ever since I got involved with RV, it seemed like there's just a type of greater intelligence around us, bigger than your conscious mind. Because when you do an RV session, you don't know what's going on. But lo and behold, sometimes, not every single time, you finish the session and you have reproduced the target picture in the most amazing way. And you don't know how you did it. But there on your page, you drew a picture of the Eiffel Tower or Mount Kilimanjaro or the Great Wall of China or any of these other targets that
based on Mars.
Based on Mars. And there you look in your P3, as it's called, your drawing, and it's really close, and you don't know how you did it. And it just suggests to you that there's an underlying intelligence beyond your conscious mind that's working whether you know it or not. And that has to be true because your body keeps going moment to moment without you consciously thinking about it. So there has to be some bigger intelligence even just within yourself. But here you see it with this sort of non-local attention. So that's the thing that it's true. Crop circles make us think of that too. Whatever designs them. We have to be honest here. People design some of those too, but even those we found affected our cameras and batteries in the strangest ways. So it's just it just shows us there's a lot more we can learn about how all of this works.
Yeah, that's so cool. And you mentioned RV. It's so interesting. I love the story about Ingo Swann.
Yes.
And it was in one of his books that we read where he drew, I think it was like a 7-Up can. And, the drawing is there, but you don't know it until you turn it, until they took the example and turned it sideways, what it said. And it was like clearly like a 7-Up logo or something like that.
Yeah, it was something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. It was really cool. We've had a little experience.
This is what even beginners can do in a typical class. You can see the target picture and what they drew. I mean, one's a race car. The person drew a race car. In this session, they even doubted themselves. They thought it can't be a race car. It's a stadium. It was a race car in a stadium.
It's then the AOLs. The AOLs, you got to...
Those analytic overlays.
Right. You doubt yourself. And in all of these where the person is nailing the target, they're doubting themselves. Yeah. This is why I'm saying it's showing you it's beyond your conscious mind. You don't even know what's going on, but you're doing a great job.
There's an information transfer. Right?
Look at this. This one always blows me away. Yep. Washington Monument. There's the target on this side over here. Washington Monument. Over here. Washington Monument. And there, look. Now, in this session, and you're absolutely right. Sometimes you have to turn it the other way to see, like you're talking about that Ingo session. You don't see it immediately. But this, I can see the guy is definitely at the target site. But in his mind, he said, this can't be the Washington Monument. He even writes down, as you're saying, Kristen, his AOL is Washington Monument. He says, oh, it can't be that. So he walks down the reflecting pool and draws the Lincoln Memorial, which is on the flip side of this page, which you can't see here. This is from my book.
That is so cool.
Opening Minds.
That's fantastic.
And like so you see this and you're thinking, how are people doing this? The only way they're capable of doing this, even when they're wrong, they're pretty close. Lincoln Memorial. Mm-hmm. He draws the Washington Monument, then the Lincoln Memorial. Well, he's in Washington, D.C., and he's pretty, he's on target there. You can see the reflecting pool. He's at the target site. It just shows us that we're more intelligent than we think we are. In other words, your conscious mind doesn't always have a good approximation of reality. You could be actually more accurate and more on than you think you are. That's the big lesson for me from RV.
Right. And so
you're doing more than you even know.
Pick it apart, right? And try to turn it into something. And that's like where pareidolia comes into play and how people see things in the sky because their mind is trying to put it together. It's like a survival mechanism or something.
Right.
And trying to make sense of the information that's coming in.
Which she wrote the book on.
And the RV stuff, it's like that information or any kind of psychic really communications comes in and it's raw form. And it's like you don't want to process it. You just want to get it out, put it on the paper.
Yeah.
Put those descriptors down or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
As soon as you start to think about it, then your mind starts to turn it into a story. We should do a show on RV. We're going to have you back to talk about remote
we need
viewing.
it back like 5 times. We have a ton of questions.
We could talk forever on this.
We'll have to continue another time because we have gone for an hour and 45 minutes. There's so many RV sessions. We could just do a whole show and I can show you. I've done hundreds of these with students. It's so fascinating how they end up, like you're saying, sometimes you have to turn the page sideways and then you see it's perfect. Your conscious mind doesn't know what's going on and it wants to think its way through the session, but it can't do it. So it lets go. And all of a sudden you do something amazing, like literally draw the Washington Monument, and you're doubting yourself. To me, this is a big message for all these topics, which is you don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on. We don't know what's going on here, but something is happening. So let's hold back our conclusions for a while and let's look at what we're seeing happening and slowly make sense of it instead of jumping to conclusions. But the first step is to admit you don't know what's going on.
Right.
I think that's great.
And this is what we all, this is the conclusion of the show. We don't know what's going on. We have some
clues going on.
No,
but something's going on.
Somebody needs.
But it's okay. We'll figure it out together. We've got shows like this. We've got podcasts and chats. And I have a Zoom group now for cryptid Bigfoot witnesses. If anyone wants to join that, it's still open to the public. We still have some slots open. We did one last week, and it's for people that have had these experiences to talk amongst each other. And even in this group, we had 3 Bigfoot witnesses, and each Bigfoot that they saw had different hair color than the other witness. Orange, white, and that deep black that they sometimes have. So if you want to go to my blog, New Crystal Mind, you can get there from the Mount Baldy link at the bottom. I'm happy to have more people join that group just to share experiences, because I think we're going to figure this out together. We can't just listen to the traditional media sources anymore. They won't do it. They won't go there. So we have to do it ourselves.
Absolutely.
Right.
This is great. Your latest book is called Dark Matter Monsters, Cryptids, Small Lightning, and the Science of Secret Life Forms. We love this. It's so up our alley, and I think our audience would really like it.
Yes, our
best place to get that book is Amazon. Is that the best place?
You can get them on Amazon, and I have a link at New Crystal Mind, my blog, where you can. I'll send you a signed copy. I will have to send anyone a signed copy. Just go to the link. It says podcast listeners, and I will sign these for you, and happy to send you one. Thank you.
Excellent. Oh, that is so cool. People can find you at your website, which is Mount Baldy. And some people hear this as a podcast. I just wanted to let them know. I believe it is MOUNTBALDY.com.
In our 25th year, 25 years.
Wow, it's amazing.
Really cool. Real quick, before we go, does this have anything to do with hair? Because I'm losing a lot of mine.
People have made that joke about me too, but it's actually about a mountain outside of Santa Fe that we used to use as a remote viewing target, where it was thought there was extraterrestrial activity. And to get our feedback, we once went down there, some of us from Boulder, Denver, to Mount Baldy and walked around. We didn't see any ETs or UFOs, but we encountered a witness on the trail who said they had seen some really strange lights over the mountain from time to time that were hovering. So that was a great bit of feedback.
That's so cool. I'm glad I asked the question.
Yeah.
So it was a great answer. So this has been a lot of fun. If you want people to seek you out, mountbaldy.com. Get the book, Dark Matter Monsters. It sounds awesome. And we'll have to come back and do this again sometime.
We have so many people ask questions.
So many comments out there.
Yeah,
and,
audience.
Things we can get to. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, let's continue another time. We're just getting started.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah, we are.
We're at the tip of the iceberg here. We're going to figure this all out.
I have so many questions I wrote down. You have no idea.
And I want to show you so many crop circles from over the years that had those strange effects on cameras, batteries, laptops. There are just so many stories. It'd be great just to do a whole show on weird things around crop circles, because we could do another hour and a half just on that.
Absolutely.
Works for us.
Yes, definitely.
Thank you again so much.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Simeon Hein. Thank you so much.